and I need to lighten some of the skin either side of that little frown line, but we'll come back to that later. So then that frown line comes down here, and then there's kind of another one up here, and it gets reasonably dark there. So on to the other eyebrow. And again, let's see if we can use this colour for the eyelashes here. And I want to preserve that speckled line from the watercolour marker, so I'm not, even though I could probably do with darkening it, I'm not going to touch that. But there's a little bit of shadow in the corner of this eye. And then the lashes here, I think I can add a dark line down there and extend the shadow beyond the corner of that eye a touch. And then we can look at the, just like we did on the first eye, we can look at the shapes the eyelids make for this eye as well. Going to keep that little bit of watercolour marker there, but I need to darken it here to help capture the expression. And then once again, we can move on to the brow. So the eyebrow here, it's a little flatter than I've got it. Kind of peters out over here on the left side, but it comes in a lot closer, or the shadow eyebrow combo comes in a lot closer to the eyelid than I've got it. So that's beginning to move in the right direction. And while I've got the dark colour on the brush, let's see if we can do some refining work on the nose as well. So I'm going to put a little line of shadow around the outside of this right hand nostril and continue it down below the nostril opening as well. Extend that purpley shadow I've got so the shadow kind of comes out onto the outer part of the nostril, under the centre of the nose here. And then I need to kind of put extra shadow here on the underside of this nostril, leaving a little bit of the lighter paint between the very dark and the shadow I'm applying now. So it goes kind of dark, super dark, lighter, and then this middle dark I'm putting on at the moment. And then I can probably use just a touch of this here and here on the right of the nose. And we'll go over to the ear, pick out a bit of shadow there as well. And now we can move down to the mouth to, use that same shadow colour basically. So I can use it to just kind of refine some of the drawing that I've done earlier. Some of it, it's got a little bit lost with the kind of loose brushwork I did. And even though the colour's not totally right, I can just work with tone and adjust the colour if needed later. So sometimes what I find is the reason I don't worry too much about the colour I'm using is, sometimes certain colours just work together and work well together for the painting and the image I'm creating, even if they don't represent reality exactly, or maybe they won't be even close to reality. So one way to think about that is to say, well, if I had a colour photograph and I converted it into black and white, would I still be able to recognise the person that I've painted? And of course you would. If you took a colour photo, just converted it to black and white on the computer, you'd be able to see exactly who that person was. Whereas if you did the opposite and just took away all the tone and kept just the different colours, you may well struggle to see who it was. Obviously it depends on the photo and the colouring and everything, and the lighting conditions and all of that. So we can use the same colour still, so I haven't done anything different, just using the same colour, moving around the painting and putting a bit of shadow on this left hand ear. And actually I think while I've got it on the brush, I can even use it for the kind of shadow region inside the mouth. So I've already got some nice dark shadow there, but on the edges of that shadow where some of the lighter colour is showing through, I can just darken things a little bit there. Well, the next thing I want to address are some of the highlights. So I want to mix up kind of an orangey pinky highlight. So let's take some of the tinting white, some of the cadmium yellow deep. That's given me quite a strong yellow, probably stronger than I wanted. But so I've just grabbed some more white and I'm mixing that into a little bit of pink I had there from before, and just mixing in the yellow, the light yellow I had on the brush already. And that's starting to go in the right direction, but I still want a little bit more of the alizarin. And let's see what that does. So when we put it on the painting. So again, squinting at my reference, it's actually quite a bit lighter along here. And that colour, in the reference, it's a little bluer at this end than I've got it. But in terms of tone, again, I'm quite happy with that. And it does become closer to what I've got on the brush as I move over to the left here. So now I can refine further this little crease line. I can bring this highlight up close to the dark line I put down just a little while ago. And there's light catching there as well. And then there's the crease line, so you've got kind of like the little dip there, but then it also kind of, there's a little ridge to the left of that dark line, which is catching the light a little bit. So as the forehead crinkles, you get, quite interesting patterns sometimes in the skin. So then it becomes a little flatter across here, and then there's another little highlight, almost triangular, there, and there's another one here, which I haven't quite put in the right place, but in terms of capturing an expression, it's probably okay for now. And then along here as well, there's a little bit of highlight within a highlight, as it were. And then that continues down there. Then on the upper forehead here, there are also some highlights, but they're kind of more in the bluey area of the spectrum, so I'm going to come back to those. But I can still use this same colour on the centre of the upper eyelid, if I can get a bit more of it on my brush. And put a little bit more there, a little bit on the bridge of the nose there. Move across to the other eye, and to the right of the eyelid, in here there's some light catching, and down here, and then underneath, let's get a bit more paint, underneath the eye here. And I want to keep those nice raggedy lines from the watercolour marker, but I can still fill in that little bit of the eyelid with some of the same colour. Where next then? So again, we've got a bit there, and I'm going to lighten that bit that I put down earlier. And then let's move down to the nose. So again, a lot of the highlights on the nose are a little more, or the very brightest highlights are a little more blue in nature, but there is a little bit of light catching there and under this nostril. So I'm putting this in between the dark shadow of the nostril and the little line of mid shadow I put down just a moment ago. We'll come around here on this other nostril. There's a little bit of light catching in there, and just a touch there as well. And then it's really quite light underneath this part of the nose on the upper lip. And then I can continue with this same colour to put a little bit of an outline above the upper lip. So there's often, no matter who you're painting, there's often just the little vaguest line of highlight around the lips. Not always, but it's often there. Certainly worth looking for. put a bit down here. Now this line I'm putting in here, that needs to be lightened further, but I'll come back to that later. And then on the corner of the lower lip here, add another highlight. Then we can move down to the chin. So the right hand side of the highlight is closer to the colour I've got on my brush than the bluey highlight that I'm going to have to enhance over here, but I will come back and do that. You can also put a little lick of the same colour here. And then we can work our way back round to this side of the nose. There's a bit of light on the ear there. And perhaps a little touch here. Now notice this bit here on the chin. You see how that kind of background colour is showing through the dry brush and there. If I can, I'm going to try and just keep that. I quite like the way that sort of works. I'm going to try and do the same over here, but we'll see. Sometimes you just kind of end up having to lose stuff, even though you kind of love it. You know, it's just the way it goes. So we'll put some of the more of the alizarin in and mix that into the yellow up here. And that's going to go onto the top of the forehead up here. So it's a fairly subtle adjustment in tone, but I just felt that it's a little bit too dark in some areas. And now, having done that, I can start to move towards the bluer, cooler highlights, which are present, more or less all over the face in different areas. So to start that process, I've just dragged my brush across the palette. I haven't cleaned it, but I'm going to put some, much more of the cerulean blue onto my brush. We'll perhaps go back and pick up some of that alizarin, which is kind of mixed in with the yellow up there. And I don't know if this is going to work at all, but so I've got quite a dark colour here, you see, in the centre of the forehead. And what I want to do is just put little... No, so that's a little too dark. So what I'm going to do, instead of doing the highlights right this second, is just indicate a few of the very gentle frown lines that are, on the forehead here. Oh, and actually in some places it is looking quite light. So it's kind of it's sort of worked, but not quite in the way I intended. And I'm still going to have to come back and put some highlights in, but just a hint. It's pretty subtle because these aren't deep creases on the forehead up here where he's frowning. It's just sort of a subtle variation. But while I've got it on the brush, I can use some of that down here below the bottom lip, and that purple kind of works well with the shadow here, which I can extend. So what you often get, you see, because the lower lip, certainly in the shape the mouth is making as he's kind of mid-conversation here, the lower lip here protrudes from the chin a little bit. So what you get is a line of very dark shadow, and then it gradually lightens a little bit within the main shadow. So it's always really important, and that's due to some reflected light bouncing back up here. But it's always worth just looking for those little variations in colour and tone within shadows. There's all sorts of stuff going on there. But what you want to do is you want to try and avoid making the contrast too high. So they really are just little subtle changes within shadow regions. So you definitely want to include them, but you don't want to exaggerate them, I would say. But I can use some of that here as well on the neck, just overlap with some of that. So I put a line of dark shadow round under there, and it's good to kind of break that up so that it looks more natural. And I can also use a bit of that. I've just noticed, if I'm fairly gentle with the application in here, just lightly dry brush a little bit on there and here as well. Don't want too too heavy, but just a touch to help define that area above the upper lip. Well, having done that, let's continue with that colour, but we'll grab some more of the tinting white and some more of the blue. So that's not the lightest blue in the world I've mixed up, and far from the purest. It's kind of a grey blue, but that's sort of what I want, I think, for these highlights up here. They're perhaps a little too vibrant, but I'm going to go with it for now. So you know, it's best to avoid sort of getting obsessed, in my opinion at least, with the style of painting I do, with copying every single little wrinkle. You just want to kind of try and assess what the overall pattern is, pick out 2 or 3 of the strongest features which will indicate that pattern, and then, you know, leave it at that, really. So now as we move down lower on the face, in general the bluey highlights get lighter, but if I go all the way down to the chin here, there are some darker bluish highlighted regions, so I'm going to just add those in now. Again, I'm trying to preserve this little bit of kind of naturally occurring texture that I like. So we don't want to go too crazy, but let's put a bit there. And then if we look to the right of this eye, there's a little flash of blue highlight there. I can put a little touch in the ear as well, and perhaps a little bit on this side of the nose and here. And perhaps just here as well, above that corner of that right hand eye. So now, having done that, now I'm going to add much more of the tinting white to that same mixture. And let's see if this is what I want. So if I put that down there, so that's not quite light enough. So I'm quite surprised by that, actually, because I grabbed a ton of white and I looked at it on the palette and I thought, well, that's way too bright. There we go. So that looks pretty bright on the palette, but over here it might not be too bad. So let's... Oh, that's pretty good. That's more or less what I want. So we're looking at the highlights on the left, the light's beaming in from the left. And even though I've kind of come down here already, I can just add a little very thin line. Not a continuous line, but just some hints at... Skin's a little shiny up here. And then a little bit on the left-hand side of the nose. And then I can put just a little line of this same colour within that highlight I put down earlier, just a little line of a slightly brighter area. And then in a similar way here, there's a little brighter patch. And then on the cheek here, just curving my brush strokes to help describe the contour. There's a bright highlight on the nose just there, and then there's a little gap where it's slightly darker, and then the highlight continues. And I'm just very lightly caressing the painting with the tips of the brush here, because I don't really want too hard a continuous line. I just want the bristles to kind of skip across the surface of the paper, so you get that kind of speckled effect within the brush stroke. So again, I can go even lighter here over the top of the lip. I need to adjust the colour of these lips, I think, at some point. Let's put a bit of light in under there. bit on the chin, a little hint there. And then, now the question is, can I use this colour in the eyes anywhere? And I think I can. I think I can probably lighten the highlight in the eye here a little bit. Now before I go to the mouth, I've just noticed the shape of the nose on the left here has got lost a little bit, so I'm just mixing this light blue into some of the pinkish colour that I had before to bring me back to a warmer highlight. I just want to put some of that down there. And just feather that across. And then with a damp finger, I'm just going to soften the edge of that I've put down. I'm not sure how well that's working, but for the moment I'm going to leave that as is. And while I've got that there, I'm just going to put a little bit of reflected light under the bulb of the nose there. So now I'm going to do the lips next, and then I'm going to move on to the scarf, and then I need to adjust the shape of the head, and then we'll see where we are. So the first thing I want to do is make the colour of this bottom lip a little pinker. So I've already got this kind of off pink on my palette here, and I'm going to grab some of the tinting white and mix that in, and let's see what that looks like when I put that onto the painting. So that's certainly, I feel, better than what I had before, so let's continue with that. Just adjust the shape of this lower lip as well. Bring some of that down there. And then I do need to go a little bit lighter, so I'm going to grab some of the tinting white again, mix that into the colour that I've already got. And bring that up from the centre to the left-hand side, into the corner of the mouth there. And a little touch here as well. And then the lighter colour on the upper lip is a little more purpley. So let's grab just a touch of the blue and mix that into the same, let's grab a little bit more, into the same patch of paint. And I'm going to put some of that up along here. Along there.